Welcome back to the Flower Files, guys. Hello to my fellow pea pods. This is where we plant stories and grow conversations. I'm your host, Liza Getz. I'm a flower farmer, florist, educator, and owner of Wildly Native Flower Farm. Today, we're talking about something that seems incredibly simple, but has the power to completely change your success as a grower. And that's these little guys, seed packets. So whether you're growing flowers for your backyard, your family, your market stand, or even your flower farm, every season starts literally with a seed. And while seed packets look small and simple and like a cool little envelope, they're actually packed with tons of information that can help you make better decisions, avoid really expensive mistakes, and grow with more confidence. I remember when I first started growing flowers, I would sit down with a stack of seed catalogs and feel a little overwhelmed. There's all these beautiful photos everywhere. And every variety they look amazing. Every flower seemed like something I absolutely had to grow. But then there were all these terms and all this information, and there's germination rates and pelleted seed and prime seed and F1 hybrids, days to maturity, long day, short day, photoperiod response, vernalization. It feels like an entire second language that maybe everybody else understands and gets a little confusing for folks. And sometimes I think some growers still may feel that way. And many of us, we actually learn by trial and error. We buy seeds, maybe because the picture is pretty. We order varieties because someone posted them on Instagram and we thought it would be a good thing to add to our mix. And then we sow them, and sometimes we hope for the best. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But the good news is that seed packets are actually here to help us. And once you understand the language and all the information that's tucked inside, you'll have a much better success before seeds ever touch the soil. So today, I'm going to walk you through what seed packets are really telling you. I'm going to explain some of the basic terminology that can sometimes be a little confusing, and we're going to call out some of those big mistakes that I see that people make when they're ordering seed. I want you to feel confident enough to be able to pick up a seed packet, open a seed catalog, and understand what you're looking at. So let's dive in. So for the past 2 weeks, we have had the incredible honor of having GeoSeed, which is part of the Park Seed group, as our guest on the podcast. And I realized, based on some of the questions and some of the feedback and some of the things that I've seen from the posts, that people have questions about seeds. So if you haven't listened to the episode with GeoSeed, I would highly recommend you go listen to that, because it's going to explain how some of the things actually happen behind the scenes. If you're just coming to this episode, you can listen to this episode and then go listen to those. But if you're one of my regular subscribers, we love you. This I figured would clarify some of the things that are sometimes on the seed packets, even in the catalogs listed underneath. So I thought it would be some good information for you guys to have. Okay, so that being said, the first thing I want to talk about is when a professional grower looks at a seed packet, what do they see? If I asked most people what they look at first, usually 9 times out of 10, most people, I'm guilty of this too, they say the picture. And I get it. The pictures are beautiful. You know exactly what you're getting. These are carrots. The seed companies want you to fall in love with that flower. But when I pick up a packet today, I don't even have a photo anymore. And if it's on there, I'm usually not looking at it. I'm looking at the information. I want the variety name. I want the days to maturity. I want the germination information, the spacing, the height, so I can calculate all of the crop timings, because every square foot on my farm matters. Every tray space in my heated greenhouse matters. And every foot of bed space that is within the fenced area matters. Because the flower may be gorgeous, but if it doesn't fit into my rotation or my market needs, it doesn't earn a spot on the farm. So one of the things I really pay attention to is how many days it takes until I hit maturity. This tells me how long it will take on average to go from planted all the way for me to be able to harvest that plant. Do I need 180 days? Do I need 60 days? Do I need somewhere in between? Now, that doesn't mean it's exact, because all of this is predicated on all of the growing conditions and all of the weather, your location. But it helps me have a planning tool. It gives me a window. So I know if I need flowers for a very specific market or event or time of year, days to maturity helps me work backward and then determine when I need to sow that crop. The next thing I'm looking for is the germination percentage. And this is where sometimes folks get a little confused. If a seed packet says 90% germination, people assume that that means 90% of their seeds will grow no matter what. And that's not actually what it means. Germination percentages are determined under that ideal testing condition. It's a perfect setup. The seed company is telling you that under controlled conditions, approximately 90% of those seeds successfully germinated. It's basically a measure of the seed quality. It's not a guarantee. So your greenhouse conditions matter. The temperature in your greenhouse matters. There's hot spots and cool spots. There's higher moisture, there's lower moisture, there's shade. There's so many factors that happen within your own greenhouse that it all impacts how that germination rate is going to be impacted. Your air circulation matters within your greenhouse. So if I sow 100 snapdragon seeds and the packet says 90% germination, I might expect around 90 healthy seedlings under ideal conditions. That's if everything is perfect. But if my trays dry out, because that happens, my temperatures are wrong, or my conditions aren't entirely ideal, I'm going to get less. On the flip side, for many crops, that's completely acceptable. And I think sometimes growers look at things on the seed packet, and when it says 90% or 95%, they think that something's wrong. And that's not necessarily true, because different crops have different needs and different germination standards. So I want to chat just a little bit about how there's all of these other terms that are sometimes listed in the catalogs underneath. Yes, they have the different pictures underneath, like good for pollinators, ground cover, full sun, early, scented. They have a lot of little icons for some of those things, and those are wonderful. But there's a couple things underneath there that I think need to be clarified. So one of those is probably an F1 hybrid. So F as in farm, the number 1 hybrid. You've probably seen this term hundreds of times, and you've probably just kind of glazed over it. An F1 hybrid is the first generation offspring from 2 carefully selected parent plants. So basically, the plant breeders spend years developing these varieties. The goal is to have improved vigor, stronger stems, better disease resistance, more uniform growth, better color, or overall improved performance. So this breeding work is one of the reasons why hybrid seeds tend to cost a little bit more. You're literally paying for years of development. Now, some people say that that means that it's a GMO. That is a whole different conversation. So if you have seeds that are grown and it's an F1 hybrid and they've taken the best qualities of that seed and they've put it back into the seed so that it has any of the qualities that we listed above, I want the one that's going to have more disease resistance. I absolutely need it to have the most consistent growth. So it's hard when there's times out in the field where certain plants are taller than others. The one that is coming up a little bit slower, that one's going to be a little bit shorter. So this is why many flower farmers continue buying those hybrid varieties even when they're a little bit more expensive. I would rather spend a little bit more on my seed to make sure that I have a consistent crop than maybe select seeds that aren't going to do as well. I need that consistency. I know that that's going to exceptionally outperform other seeds. So if you compare that to an open-pollinated variety, an open-pollinated plant reproduces naturally and generally grow true from saved seed. So this means if you save seed and replant it, you're more likely to get similar results the following year. That makes it super attractive for gardeners and growers interested in seed saving. So let's talk about real world examples here. If you're in love with dahlias, and I know there's some of you out there, and it took me a little while to get on the bus, but we all love dahlias here. They were a little intimidating when I first started. It wasn't something I was going to grow. And it was very confusing because they said, well, you have to get tubers and it's available for seed. And what do you do with these plants? Actually, dahlias are not open pollinated. Those guys, if you take the seeds and you plant them, you get entirely new varieties of dahlias. They don't bloom true to the seed that, or the plant, the mother plant that you take it from. It doesn't bloom true to that. So by this I mean if you have a pink dahlia with really pretty yellow edges and it's a ball type and it's beautiful and you take the seed and you plant it, you're not gonna get that. You could get something completely different. Most of the time you actually will. If you want it to be identical, that's when you have to go underground, pull up the roots or the tubers, which are actually edible. I don't know how they taste. That's on our list for a trial next week. I'm not sure how I feel about that, but that's a whole different topic. So you would make sure you're splitting the tubers, you get the eye and all of those things. In contrast, if you love something, say Centaurea, bachelor button, you can take those seeds, you can plant them directly. If it's blue, it's going to bloom blue. If you take pink, it's going to bloom pink. If you take the dark magenta, it's going to bloom dark magenta for you. So those are wonderful to save seeds and be able to know that you're going to have those moving forward. So you have F1 hybrids, you have open pollinated. There's another type of seed. There's so many different varieties of seed, but I feel like people also have really gotten into the heirloom varieties. So what is that? An heirloom variety is an older open pollinated variety that has been passed down over generations. And I think the cool thing about these is many of these guys actually have awesome stories attached to them. So they bring unique colors, shapes, characteristics all into the garden. A lot of the times when people have really cool tomatoes, that is an heirloom variety. There's heirloom varieties all over the place, and it makes a lot of sense to kind of mix that up a little bit. So when you're talking about heirloom species, there's a lot of really neat flowers. There are whole companies whose entire brand is built around the heirloom varieties. So it's flowers, it's all kinds of vegetables, and it's things that are usually just a little bit different. But if you want that true, exactly the same the whole way through, you're generally talking more about those F1 hybrids. So, and the last thing to talk about in this little section here is really the species. Species refers to the naturally occurring plant rather than a specifically bred cultivar. So I want you to think of species almost as like the original blueprint. So there's these cultivated varieties that come from species plants that breeders have improved over time. So breeders have taken the base plant and they have bred characteristics into it. Go all the way back to Gregor Mendel and his peas, because I'm sure somewhere in your biology, somewhere in your life, you remember the round, the wrinkled, the yellow, and all of the genetic characteristics. That's basically what the breeders are doing. They are making changes to make improvements to plants over time. Okay, here's the cool part. There's some fancy seed technology out there now because the world has realized that not all seeds are super easy to plant. I have a young lady who works for me, and we discovered that planting teeny tiny seeds was not her thing. So we had tray cells. They have 128 holes in them, and we gave her snapdragon seeds to plant. If you've never planted snapdragon seeds are smaller than the tiny little sprinkles that are rainbow sprinkles. And I don't mean jimmies, because there's jimmies, there's sprinkles, there's nonpareils. Okay, the little white things that are on a snow cap candy, they're smaller than that. They are about the size of finely ground pepper. So I don't mean coarse pepper, I mean finely ground pepper. She was not a fan of planting those. I'm not a fan of planting those. I usually take some wax paper, I have it tucked, I create a little U, and I tap, 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 tap. And I hope that there's maybe 2 or 3 per cell. Not her style. She picked them up, she put them on like sprinkles, and she was like, done. So when you're hand planting and when you're hand seeding, it's actually really difficult to work with some of these seeds. So I feel like there's the backyard grower who buys a seed packet, plants it, has the little dome. Maybe they have a greenhouse, maybe they don't. If they don't have a greenhouse, they have a humidity dome on top. If you have a greenhouse, we're still using humidity domes, but maybe you're planting 10 of them. We're planting hundreds of them. Our rows hold about 620 plants, not that I've ever counted, 620 plants per row. So if we have 128 trays and we know that we have 90% germination, I know I'm going to get about 100. So I'm planting 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 trays if I want 2 full rows of snapdragons. When you get to that space, it's a lot and it's hard. So one of the things that some growers do, and we're not quite there yet because we grow so many different varieties within the species. I have one variety of snapdragon, but I have pink and I have white and I have ivory and I have yellow and I have apple blossom and I have dark pink and I have magenta. So in that row, I have all of these different varieties. When you get to the place that you're a huge commercial grower and you're growing hundreds of just one color, now you're going to start to move to a different type of seed. And this is where some of the technology comes in. There's lots of different types of seed technology. There's machines that have plates that match the type of seed tray that you have. It's attached to a vacuum over here. You drop the seed on, you turn on the vacuum, the little seeds are all sucked up, you shake off the extras, you flip the lid, you place it on, you turn off the vacuum, they magically drop in. And that sounds great. I know my life and my luck, I would end up sucking up the dirt or something and clog it. We do it by hand. Fortunately, everybody who works for me agrees we do it by hand. However, one of the things that has been a game changer for us is pelleted seed. And I think pelleted seed, many people have probably encountered that. This episode of the Flower Files is made possible by our sponsors. Bob Bell Chevrolet, helping Maryland drivers stay safe on the road with dependable vehicles and exceptional customer service. Ivingo Creative, providing branding, website design, and marketing solutions that help small businesses tell their story and grow with confidence. And the Tax Chick Pro, helping entrepreneurs, farmers, and small business owners navigate taxes, bookkeeping, and financial planning with less stress and more clarity. We are grateful for their support of the Flower Files and our growing community of flower lovers, gardeners, farmers, and small business owners. If you've ever grown Lisianthus, you've probably worked with pelleted seed because Lisianthus seed is incredibly tiny. The seed itself can almost be literally as impossible as a snapdragon seed. And that pellet creates a larger coating around the seed, making it easier to sow much more accurately. Sometimes it's dyed as well, but we'll talk about that. So if the seed is super tiny, it makes it hard to handle, and we're using large automatic, maybe a drum seeder instead, or that vacuum style. So the drum style is a little different too, where there's a drum and it rotates and it pulls your tray through. So each time it only picks up one row worth and turns and drops. So it just keeps turning and dropping as it goes through. So if you're using some type of automation, if you're using anything along those lines, it helps the seed not get stuck in or even lost in the plates. Most of the time, your larger growers are using these machines, and having a smooth seed really helps. It's also helpful for seeds that maybe have a little bit of a wonky shape too. So if it's really tiny or it has a funny shape, they put this coating on it to make it easier. My question, because I always, have to ask 500 questions, what's the coating made of? Like, can I eat it? What is it? Is it like sugar? What was it? So I spent some time looking that up, and usually it's clay or diatomaceous earth, something along those lines that those seeds are coated in. They're coated in something that is natural, and it adds a little weight as well. So clay, perlite, that diatomaceous earth. Then the companies take those powders and they mix them with water and a binder. So it's kind of like a plant-based glue. And they tumble them to build a round, uniform pellet. And that coating usually makes those tiny seeds a lot easier to not only see, but to also space out. There's lots of different kinds of coatings too. So some coatings have other additives like a fungicide or insecticide. So make sure you know what you have before you plant them. So pelletized is just to make it larger. And they're often dyed, as I said, with like a food grade color, because if you're planting seeds that are pelleted and it's food, you want to make sure that it is safe to consume as well. So it helps you see it in the soil because most seeds are brown, and that is a protective measure. And once that coating gets wet, the coating completely dissolves. It's kind of like the seed has gone to the spa and they're now getting a bath bomb. It just kind of dissolves. So it's a little bit different. Another thing you may see on a seed packet that's a little different too is something called primed. So it doesn't mean that it's the number one. It's not the number prime. Prime seed is another process where it partially activates the seed before packaging. They do this for some of the seeds that are particularly difficult to germinate. And not only are they difficult to germinate, but you may not have as much germination uniformity. So they treat the seed to start the germination process, but they literally have the science down so good that they stop it before the root pops out. If the root pops out, you can't stop that. I mean, you can stop it, but that seed is going to die. They have it timed just right. They soak them in water or a special sugary solution, and then they quick dry it back out. So this gives the seed a little bit of a head start, which makes them sprout faster. They grow more evenly, and that lets them beat the weed seeds because they have a head start. So if something is a really long germination rate, this may be a way to actually help them have that boost that they need. If you've ever pre-soaked a seed to help germination rates, you are actually priming them. Things that immediately come to mind for me of use for us, we prime all of our sweet pea seeds. They're all primed. And we also prime all of our bells of Ireland. And that makes a huge difference. I mean, a noticeable percentage difference in the germination rate. The trade-off with prime seed is sometimes it has a shorter shelf life. So if you're buying primed seed, you need to know that you need to get that seed, use it, and get it out of the cooler a lot quicker than if it was something that was very inert. We time all of our plantings for anything that we prime, like the sweet peas or the bells of Ireland. We time those so that we are absolutely ready to go within a day or two, like we have it all timed, because that's not something that I can have soak and then sit for 3 days, 4 days, because then it starts to actually ferment and gets really gross. And how do I know that? Because it's happened. So let's talk a little bit about seeds that may be coated. So there's different types of coatings on seeds, which are slightly different than primed and pelleted, because coatings serve different purposes depending on the crop and the manufacturer. And sometimes they're just designed to improve handling. Sometimes they're designed to help with moisture management. Sometimes, to basically sum up how coated seeds work, is they have a really thin, tight layer, and it adds a tiny little bit of weight. It contains some active things like maybe a fungicide or a fertilizer or even beneficial bacteria, because the main goal is to protect the plant from disease. So if you have coated seed, it's coated for a reason, which is different from treated seed. Treated seed contains a protective treatment that is intended to help reduce certain diseases or pests during germination and early growth. So if you've ever been on a large-scale ag farm, all of the corn that comes in, that is treated. So if you're looking through your catalogs, you want to make sure that you understand, is it treated? What is it treated for? And do I need that for my growing condition? Some growers prefer treated seed, others prefer untreated seed. There's no one size fits all answer, but it's important for you to understand what you're purchasing. If you buy sweet corn and you open the pack and you see that it's pink, it's treated. Why? That is pre-treated to make sure that you have a better germination rate. So I hope that makes sense. So let's move into some catalog terminology that can sometimes be a little confusing for certain growers, especially if you're new. So we're going to start easy. Direct sow. Direct sow is super simple. It means that you're going to plant the seed directly into the garden or into the field. Super easy. Doesn't need to be transplanted. Sunflowers, super easy to direct sow. There are not a lot of flowers that we on the farm direct sow because I want 100% germination out in that field. If I have 100 holes and I have a 90% germination rate in perfect conditions, that means I have 10 holes that are undone, which are 10 holes that I can have weeds grow in. So to ensure that we have the best possible growing situation, we will pre-sprout everything in trays. Now, if you're growing in the backyard and your entire crop, you're not depending on for your grocery money, it's safe to kind of play with that and watch it a little bit differently. So basically, technically what we do is we transplant. We direct sow into the trays and then we transplant. So that means that you're going to start it somewhere else and move it later on. Pretty self-explanatory. There's a couple different types of plants and flowers. I'm going to focus on flowers, really. But it kind of falls into the same bucket for vegetables as well. There's cool crops, which are just as they sound. They grow in a cool season. So lettuce grows in the spring and in the fall. We have flowers that grow in the spring and in the fall. And there are crops that tolerate cool temperatures and benefit from growing during those cooler seasons. There's lists of them, and that's something that we will talk about a little closer to actually the cool growing season. Right now it's summer, so we are in the warm season. So these are warm season flowers because they like warm weather. Just for a point of clarification, because I know this is something that some people get confused, an annual only grows for 1 year. It is an annual, for 1 year, it's an annual cycle. Perennial is for years and years and years, and they usually tend to get better the older they are. Then there's biennials. Biennials grow, put all of their growth into one season, and then flower the following year. So you have these different seasons that they grow, and then throughout them inside, there's a couple different things that happen as well. So you have cool season annuals, warm season annuals, cool season perennials, warm season perennials, cool season biennials, warm season biennials. So within that, you have all of those pieces. Then, in order to encourage more growth and a more robust plant, sometimes the notes will say pinching is encouraged, or pinching the plants after the second set of leaves set. Things like that you may say, but be careful, because even within species, you could pinch something and it may not hold true for the entire species. Celosia is one of those. You can pinch multiple types of celosia, but you never, ever, ever pinch the Bombay celosia, because if you pinch that, you'll never get a flower. You'll pinch the flower right out. So you have to know which ones to pinch and which ones not to pinch. So pinching means removing the growing tip, and that encourages branching. You take out that apical meristem in the center that sends the hormones back down into the plant, and it tells all of the little side shoots to be like, hey guys, you gotta catch up. So in order for some seeds to grow, they need what's called vernalization. Vernalization is a really fancy word for take your seeds and put them in the fridge. Some seeds require a cold temperature to encourage them to actually start growing and flowering. And it will tell you vernalization is recommended, or these seeds are pre-chilled, or there will be very specific notes about that. If you notice that your germination rate is off, double check and make sure that your seed doesn't need any type of vernalization, and that makes a difference. Then, when you're talking about cool season, warm season, there's also photoperiod, and that is a fancy word for day length. How long of the day, how much sunlight. Some plants bloom based on how many hours of daylight they receive. Long day plants flower when days become longer. Short day plants flower when days become shorter. Kind of basic. In the mix of all of that is another term that you may hear, which is usually, I feel like it's usually most familiar for folks with bolting. And bolting means that a plant is rushing into flowering, and that's usually due to stress or environmental conditions. So again, lettuce hates the heat. And if it's like nice and cool, and then all of a sudden you get an 80-day spike, the plant's like, holy crap, it's summer. I've got to put my seeds into production. I'm going to die. We're going to bolt and get all of these seeds started. And that's basically the mentality of the plant trying to ensure survival. So bolting usually is when a plant rushes into flowering due to stress or environmental conditions. I know that was heavy, and I know there's so much information, but understanding these terms alone can really improve your success, because now you can look at all of the information and you're not just guessing. It makes a little more sense as to how you can plan some things. But I want to talk about the price behind that, because one of the questions that I hear frequently is, why can one packet cost a few dollars and another seems so expensive? Or you open up the seed packet and inside the seed packet is another little packet. That's usually because it's super tiny, like those snapdragons. The answer to the pricing is because it starts with breeding. Developing a new variety literally takes years. And then it takes years to get into the catalog. The variety must be trialed and evaluated. Seed production requires land labor, isolation, harvesting, cleaning, storage, and testing. And every batch undergoes germination testing and quality control. So those different crops produce seed differently. Sunflowers, so straightforward. You grow the sunflower, you harvest the sunflower. When you are ready to harvest them, you take the dried seed head. I've literally seen people hit it with rebar to get all of the seeds to drop out. Here's your seeds. Merry Christmas. You move on. Zinnias, fairly productive. You can take your zinnias, you can pull them apart. Marigolds, you snap the head off, you get all of the seeds, you can harvest those. Lisianthus, totally different story. Tiny seed, complex production, extensive breeding. The amount of work behind that seed packet, it's honestly invisible to us as growers. And same thing with snapdragons and some of your really tiny seeds. We don't see that part. So I want to talk real quick about a couple mistakes that I see folks make when it comes to buying a seed over and over and over. Number one, they buy the seed too late. I'll get to it. I'm busy. Oh, I'm going to get my order done. The best varieties are often the ones that sell out first. So make sure you have your plan, you know exactly what you're getting, and you order on time. Second mistake, I'm guilty of it too, but sometimes I choose varieties based only on photos or a social media post. Hey, that would be great. A beautiful flower isn't always a productive flower. I think one of my biggest mistakes was I tried for years to grow a specific variety of flax. The first year, it grew 6 inches. I was like, oh, I did something wrong. Okay, I'm going to try it again next year. Try it again next year. Still 6 inches. I was like, wow, I really screwed up twice. So reevaluating and making sure that the space that you have is taken up by something that actually makes sense and is productive for what you need it to be. I can't use a 6-inch flower other than maybe in a scattered vase. That will never hit a market bouquet for me, ever. It will never go into a wedding bouquet. It's not going to work. So that flower for us, beautiful. For some reason, that does not work for us. Number 3, ignoring those maturity dates, because the timing really does matter. If you need a filler flower in July and all of a sudden you're traditionally and historically the numbers decrease in the amount of bouquets that you start sending out, do you even need it? Do you need something more earlier in the spring or later in the fall? You've got to look at your timing and make sure what you're growing matches what you need. Number 4, and this took me a little bit of time to understand. I would order the exact number of plants that I thought I needed. Nature doesn't always cooperate, so make sure you build in extra. Build in extra for crop failure, for the rabbits, for little things that happen, maybe they get stepped on. Build in that extra, because there's nothing worse than having a tray of seeds that you've spent so much time and energy to put together, and all of a sudden half of it doesn't germinate, or a slug came through, or the cat laid down on it and snapped half of them, and now you're standing there and you don't have what you need. Or it's a lot nicer to pick out the best ones and maybe give somebody the little extras that you don't need for their garden somewhere else. So always build in that extra. Number 5, don't skip the germination instructions. Different crops have different requirements. Those instructions are there for a reason. There's a lot of time, energy, and money wrapped up in seed production. And there are people whose entire lives wrap around seed production. So pay attention to those instructions, find out what works for you, and make it work the best that you can, because it's all about what you need. It really has to be what you need and what makes sense and what makes you money. So as we wrap up today's episode, I want to leave you just kind of with a basic thought, because the goal today is not to become a seed expert. The goal isn't to memorize every single term in a seed catalog. The goal is not to memorize every single style of seed information and all of the background. The goal is simply to become a confident grower, that when you open a catalog or pick up a seed packet, you understand a little better about what it's trying to tell you. Because when you understand that language of seeds, you make better decisions, which means you waste less money, which means you grow with more confidence, and ultimately you become a better grower. So thank you guys so much for spending a little part of your day here with me on the Flower Files. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe. Please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a fellow gardener or flower farmer. Until next time, keep planting, keep learning, and keep growing. This is the Flower Files, where we plant stories and grow conversations.